Hi everyone, welcome to the TBR Webinar series. Today, Principal Analyst Patrick Heffernan and the Professional Services team will be discussing IT services expectations for 2019, assets, industries, and human transformation. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. At the bottom of your screens, you'll see a series of buttons. From left to right, you can access the slides, audio controls, Q&A, speaker bios, our survey, and social sharing. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a replay link as well as a link to view and register for other TBR webinars. If you have any questions for us, please submit them via the Q&A widget in On24. You may also reach out to us after the event at webinars@tbri.com. Thank you again for joining us, and here's Patrick to begin the webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So welcome to today's discussion around IT services. It's kind of a pre-predictions webinar. We're going to roll out a predictions document either later this or actually next month or in early December. And after we do that, we'll put together a webinar specific to the bigger, broader predictions that we put out for 2019. But we wanted to kind of preview that and talk about some of the things that are on our minds right now. And if we had been a little bit smarter, you wouldn't be looking at nice professional pictures of us. You'd be looking at some cartoons of us in costume or something like that, because it is Halloween. No matter who's grumpy about it, it is Halloween. So we're going to try and keep this webinar kind of loose. Please send your questions during the session, and we'll get to them, and we'll have a good chat. So the first thing I want to put out there is that we produce here in TBR and within the professional services practice, we produce a lot of work. We produce a lot of it on a schedule. We produce it. Are we seeing the slides? Yep. We're just making sure everybody can see slide, which should be 3 by now. So you're not seeing slide 3 yet? We're still on the beginning slide. So give me a second. Let me see if we can figure out what's going on. Okay. You're good? All right, we're good. So saying we produce a lot of reports on a schedule based on when companies release their earnings. We produce what I would consider a pretty high volume of reports. That is, a lot of companies that we cover quarterly, and we cross a pretty wide range of different companies in different areas within services and within technology broadly. So today it's kind of valuable to take a step back and look at some of the bigger picture across the trends of all these companies. And I want to mention in particular that we do, in addition to the scheduled reports that we put out, we do a lot of special reports. You'll see there's a range of topics that we've covered this year. Those special reports are driven by events that we attend that are put on by different companies and by different industry groups. It's driven by the news, whatever happens out there, and then it's also driven by our own interests, the things that we hear about, that we get questions about, that just sort of spark our own interest. So if you have ideas, of course, we're always welcome, always open to looking at new things and doing special reports on new things. And I also want to add that not only give some substance behind when I talk about the volume of reports that we produce and who we cover. Here is the full scope of the IT services landscape that we cover, at least in terms of the names of the vendors. And you can see it also mentions there we cover management consultancies, we cover companies that are specific in the healthcare services area, we cover public sector, which for us means the U.S. federal government. And we start with, as it notes on the left, we start with these individual vendors' strategies, what are they trying to do, and then we look at the performance. Are they actually succeeding? And it's pretty comprehensive in my mind in terms of the IT services landscape that we're covering, and then we're looking at the top players across all those areas. So what we're going to do today is focus on some big trends at the start and then dive into a couple of specific vendors that we can talk about to sort of bring to light some of those trends. So here we have 3 ideas we think are going to shape 2019. And again, this is sort of our preview of our predictions. So these things might change by the time we get to the end of December. These things will likely change by the time we get to the middle of the first quarter of 2019. But at the moment, these are honestly the questions that we are being asked by our clients all the time. These are the things that come up again and again. We have our TBR answers to these questions, but we also know that our answers, as they are today, are going to evolve over the next 2 months, over the next year, the things that we think and we say now, and the things that we even put in writing in the reports, we understand are going to evolve. And we also understand that these are not the only important trends in the IT services space. There are lots of other trends out there. We could have talked about artificial intelligence going enterprise-wide. We could talk about the impact of automation, particularly on BPO and some of the other service lines. But again, we wanted to hit on these because these are really the questions that we are being asked from our clients on an ongoing basis over the last year, 6 months or so. So before we dive into some of the answers that we think, we'll put a poll out there. And co-innovation is one of the things we'll talk about. So the question for everybody on the line is, what is co-innovation actually primarily used for? Is it a sales enablement tool? Is it about solution development? Is it a little bit of both, or is it just something else entirely that we're missing? And this, of course, ties back to this idea of asset-based consulting. This ties back to the idea of consultancies in particular developing IP in a different way than they have been in the past. And a lot of that development, as we hear about it, is co-innovation with both technology partners, whether those are the large-scale technology partners or the startups, or it's co-innovation with clients. And it's that latter part, the co-innovation with clients, that to us, of course, is the more interesting story. A couple of companies getting together and figuring out what cool things they can do with technology is not nearly as interesting to us as clients being able to go to their consultancies or their IT services vendor and saying, hey, this is my problem, help me out with it. So we'll get to the results of that in a few minutes, but I want to talk about these three big trends. And so what we're going to do, I'm going to walk through what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing with respect to these trends, and then I'm going to turn it over to, then I'm going to talk about PwC myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen and Boz, who are going to talk about Accenture and IBM, and then we'll turn it over to Elitza, who is going to talk about Capgemini, as a way, looking at those four companies as a way of looking at how these trends are affecting the IT services space broadly. So asset-based consult, and I'm going to speak really fast, and I guess that's why they have a replay of this, so you can go back and slow down and listen to what I'm saying. But please, if you do have questions, send them in. We will get to them at the end. So asset-based consulting. So, for us, it's really using IP and especially software as an integral part of a consulting engagement. Now, that isn't necessarily new. It's not a new trend across the IT services and the consulting space. I think what is new and what we're getting more questions about is how much of a reliance is there now on that IP being developed in-house, that IP being developed and deployed as part of a solution, as part of the business model for a lot of these consultancies and the IT services vendors. And it has an impact on making software as a service or managed services that are based on that IP. It becomes entirely part of the consulting business model. And we think that trend that has emerged over the last couple of years is only going to accelerate as we go into 2019. And what it does, most importantly, maybe, is that it then pivots the overall business model for consultancies to aligning themselves with the potential for pull-through of other services associated with that IP or associated with that asset, or simply other services that the firm provides. There's a lot of implications on what I just said for some of the specific vendors, and we'll get to that. I think the best single way that it's been explained to us in terms of the impact on the consultancies and the IT services vendors themselves is a shift from, as someone said to us just recently, from slides to code. So you're no longer just going in and presenting a client with a bunch of slides, a PowerPoint deck. You're actually walking in with some code, with some IP that you can work with. So that's asset-based consulting, and again, we'll touch on that as well when we talk about the different vendors specifically. With industry, the important thing here is this idea of go where you're strong, where the demand is for what you offer that will grow, and where you can be within the top 3 to 5. That middle section is really important, and we're hearing a lot of questions from our clients about exactly this, is how do they align both what they have what the industry expertise that they have with industries that they expect are going to grow in terms of their demand for the particular services, for IT services more broadly, for maybe digital transformation as a piece of that. But in the end, there's no sort of question that that IT services providers must be industry focused. It's no longer an option. It's honestly, for some companies, I think a bit of a shift from being able to provide services across a horizontal or being able to provide a wide range of IT services to actually being able to focus in on the industries. And I think we're going to see an acceleration in acquisitions around hyper-specialized assets within particular industries. I think we're going to see a repeat of what happened a few years ago, where companies were acquiring or setting up joint ventures with assets. With boutiques or with folks that had a kind of industry expertise that was specialized enough that would bring them deeper into an industry, maybe than they already were. All of it anticipating that particular industry or that sub-industry was going to grow faster than the rest of the market. And then the last piece, digital transformation to human transformation. Hopefully this idea sort of resonates with everybody, the idea of humans being the actual true roadblocks to lots of technology finally being adopted. And I think here for us, there's an important part of this has been the change that we've seen in the way that IT services vendors look at change management. And I think in the past, change management had been a necessary component, a useful piece of the IT services puzzle, but it wasn't necessarily something that was considered a leading edge, the tip of the spear, or something that was truly essential when it came to digital transformation. We have seen that shift in particular in the last couple of years, but I think we're going to see an acceleration in 2019 where change management becomes an integral part of digital transformation that it hadn't been in the past. And that really is being driven by this idea that it's the humans that provide the biggest roadblock. We'll get into, again, more of that when we get to some of the specifics. So we'll look now at the poll results that came in. What is co-innovation primarily used for? And I'm regretting now putting a little bit of both in there because that's always the go-to answer when we put a poll out there, if folks are given an option to say a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But maybe that reflects that in IT services broadly, and and when you talk about something like co-innovation, the gray area takes most of the mass. So I guess I'm not surprised. I would be curious, the folks that put something else, shoot us a note in the Q&A or shoot us a note by email to let us know what exactly that something else might be. So we're going to pivot now to some of the specific examples, and I'm going to start off, and I promise I'm not going to talk for too much longer because you're getting tired of my voice. We'll get Jen and Boz on here in a moment. But I want to talk about PwC, and I want to talk in particular about what their business experience and technology mantra or the way that they've gone about doing their work has changed with respect to BXT and as a way of looking at those three trends and how PwC has kind of ridden those three trends and how we see it continuing into 2019 and beyond. And I want to make three key points on BXT. First is, this is now operational. It's no longer aspirational. We've spent a lot of time with PwC over the last few years. We've heard about BXT for quite some time, and it had for a long time been where the firm was headed. We're seeing it now in practice. We're seeing it at scale, and we're seeing that they've really taken the time to create pathways for their existing clients to move from a traditional relationship or a traditional engagement into this BXT framework. I think it has also begun to have an impact on their talent, how they manage their talent, how they retain their talent, and if you're not at PwC and you're listening here, perhaps how they've been able to recruit talent away from you. So I think that's important to understand. It is operational now. It's not just aspirational. The second point is that it did take time. As I mentioned, we have been hearing from PwC about BXT for a while now. They acquired BGT, which is a digital agency, a while ago. They acquired Booz & Company, I would argue, an important part of how this was able to come together. They invested heavily in experience centers around the world. They still needed some internal champions in order to bring BXT fully to that operational state, and they had to transform themselves. So I think another important lesson when looking at these trends and thinking about how companies respond to them and how your partners and your peers might respond to trends across IT services is that, while the trends may seem imminent and critical and important and chaotic, it does take time, and even a firm that has been successful in addressing a lot of these challenges in the marketplace, it still takes some time to make those pivots, those changes. And then the last thing is we see this in particular as an important way for PwC to pull through a lot of the traditional work. So it's really critical to appreciate that the new, as Accenture defines it, the new as DXC defines it, the new as any of the IT services vendors out there define the new, doesn't actually replace the traditional, but it pulls it along, it amplifies it, it opens new clients within existing clients, it opens new opportunities to provide those traditional services. So I think it's critical to understand that even as we look at the bright and shiny and exciting things that are happening around digital transformation, around BXT broadly, around AI and automation and analytics and IoT and blockchain and all of that, an appreciation that those really are a way to pull through what are the core traditional services that IT services vendors still gain most of their revenues from. So just to let everyone know, there have been a couple of write-ups specific to PwC over the last couple of months, one from an analyst event in New York City and another from an analyst event in Tokyo. Those are on the website, so you can go see those to get a feel for what exactly we're also saying about PwC in addition to everything I just said. And so before we get to Jen and Boz, we'll take another poll question. This time it's not exactly a question, but that's the way it goes. Talk to me about data interoperability. Is it an essential accelerator for digital transformation? Is it an unavoidable roadblock to true digital transformation? Is it aspirational and a services? Will it be a services opportunity, but it's not really a reality now and won't be soon? Or do you just don't know where things are, where things stand with data interoperability? From my perspective, I don't think we've ever put a polling question out there that has exact opposite answers available for you. But is it an essential accelerator or an unavoidable roadblock? It's kind of, is it black or is it white? Not a lot of gray area between those, but maybe that's why everyone's going to say the third question or the third answer. We'll see what happens. All right, and so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Boz, who's going to start off our next section by talking about Accenture. Boz?
Sure. Thank you, Patrick, and thanks, everyone, for joining us today. As we kind of listened to Patrick for the last 10-15 minutes about the overall trends in the industry, how we think about asset-based consulting and the change of the industry as a differentiator or the shift towards human transformation. I think Accenture as a company has certainly been one of those that has set many of those trends. Some are a little bit more mature than others. But the way the company has been operating, and our assessment has been for them is being a be digital to digital kind of a mantra that's been dictating their resource management and go-to-market strategy, portfolio development, and so forth, have been certainly pivoting in a sense away to an extent from their deep industry expertise. And that's just going to put an asterisk right there. They certainly operate by industry. Their P&L is managed by industry. They've been really successfully collaborating with the businesses like Accenture Digital and Accenture Strategy, Operations, Consulting, Technology. But investing in platforms, investing in IP, for us, we see it more like adding like a third dimension to that matrix, to where Accenture could really develop a hybrid services, IT services model, to where it can start charging for selling software just like a software company, and then still trying to capture the bulk of the revenue as a support and kind of a managed service opportunities, which is in a sense what a lot of its peers are trying to accomplish. We don't think that opportunity is reaching scale yet, but certainly there's some examples, and we know Accenture, while it maintains a broad relationship with a lot of over 150 technology vendors, there are 7 vendors that actually now that are really the one that helping it move the needle in terms of revenue, from both managing legacy assets as well as getting into new areas. Kind of be like more of a both cloud-based and on-prem based solutions. So it's the thinking around it. It's the go-to-market around it. I think that what Accenture might be still missing, although they start doing some of their businesses, its big part comes around from the compensation part of how and who gets involved when he's trying to sell platform-based services. That's the thing. That's the nuance that not very many vendors address. That as a go-to-market perspective. What they have been successfully addressing is, as a company, is that last piece of the puzzle is transforming a lot and focus on the employee experience internally and really kind of drinking their own Kool-Aid essentially of their own applications moving to the cloud, having employees being able to go through a lot of training and reskilling. We've seen a lot of reskilling, especially within their BPO organization, and trying to able to automate a lot of those low-level task services, but then move up and retrain and upskill those folks, to more application services kind of a solution. So it's that shift that it's taking some time. Obviously, they're a large organization, over 460,000 people, so it's not an easy task. But if you look at their financial performance, they are the ones that actually are winning market share from from a lot of its peers that are 25 to 30% of the overall size, and they're growing at a much slower rate, especially comparing to the India-centric vendors, the lower end of that spectrum. So it does have some work to do along the way, especially around the compensation and packaging of those platform solutions. There are some room for growth and improvement, but I think what they may struggle with is the messaging to the market, to the stakeholders, to Wall Street, and so forth. One last thing kind of to add for Accenture is that Patrick brought up some of the focus of the industry-specific processes and specialization. That's the kind of be the focus of acquisition targets and R&D development. Accenture has been trying to do that. I mean, most recent example is the acquisition of Target State, really adding RPA-based solutions for corporate and commercial lending. That's a very specific for the financial services organization. That's just kind of an example of, thinking of what are those processes that are digitally mature, essentially, that maybe the organization needs to add some more of a specialization for that matter. And in terms of interoperability, I think as we think about the broader trends, we heard from Adobe, Microsoft, and SAP in the recent initiative, the Open Data Initiative. That's great on paper, great on marketing push, but in reality, I think there's still a long way to go when it comes to actually the merging the architecture and setting up all the governance that may be required. Certainly great opportunities for consultancies with governance and compliance kind of a background. But Accenture, since we're on that topic for them, they've been thinking in the similar direction. They've launched what they call it now MyConcerto. Initially, it was called the Accenture Intelligent Enterprise Platform. Now it's called MyConcerto, essentially to promote data interoperability as a concept and thinking about maybe establishing standards in the industry. Long way to go. A lot of proof of concept and ideas right now on paper. Still, a large portion comes from legacy service opportunities for that company, but the innovation, they're not shy now from innovation and spending on R&D and acquisitions for that matter. I'll turn it over to Jen with IBM to contrast and compare.
Okay, so I think with IBM, as we're seeing Accenture shift more toward assets and slightly, although not significantly away from the industry focus. We're seeing IBM move in the opposite direction, as we have seen over the past 2 years. IBM Services and Accenture sort of jockeying for position and kind of learning from each other along the way as the two major, global IT services firms that we cover. So I think what's interesting about IBM Services is they have had industry expertise and industry consulting as part of their model, forever, and also, more significantly since the acquisition of PwC's consulting business, 15 or so years ago. But it hasn't necessarily been in the forefront until very recently, when they kind of pivoted their GBS operating model, go-to-market model, to be more industry-led and more as a lead-in to IBM's broader technology portfolio. I think they realized, at least over the past couple of years, that going with a purely technology-first approach with Watson solutions and cloud and other kind of technology offerings that they have, putting those out in the market as industry-specific solutions without a services component wasn't necessarily a successful strategy for them, as we have seen with the challenges that they've had with the Watson Health unit most recently. So I think, moving forward, they're now looking at GBS and consulting and industry consulting to be at the forefront of these really broad kind of transformative solutions, particularly around blockchain, that we've seen a number of large engagements in the market that are focused on solving industry problems with a horizontal, with an emerging technology solution. But all that said, IBM still isn't really organized, at least from a P&L perspective, by industry, at least not to the investor community. They don't report by industry like Accenture does. They don't necessarily promote themselves that way. They really are more of a horizontal solution portfolio, from digital strategy through the cognitive process transformation solution set to cloud application innovation. It's really about the using emerging technologies to solve sort of line of business problems, but not necessarily unique to any particular industry. But where we see the industry expertise come through is through the individual client engagements. One of the biggest examples I think that we were hearing about most recently is the work that IBM has done with Walmart to create the IBM Food Trust platform, which was an engagement. I mean, IBM and Walmart have been working together for a long time. They work together using co-innovation to come up with this blockchain solution for the food supply chain that over the years has turned into an industry solution, an industry platform that IBM is now offering to the broader market, and getting more engagement from other pieces of the supply chain. But it wasn't necessarily starting from a place of this is going to be the industry solution. It kind of came out organically through the course of a client engagement. So I think it's just sort of an interesting nuance and difference from the way that IBM Services interacts with its clients and treats industry as compared to Accenture, where they certainly have industry solutions, but they come from the work that IBM does with its clients, to serve a particular technology or business problem. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Patrick, I guess, to take us through the answers to the poll question. Yep,
that's the first thing you do is look at data interoperability, and I hope we can. Oh, that looks like the question. Let me go. Let's go see. There we go. Nope, still not seeing.
Yeah, go back.
Poll results.
Give it a moment. I think before that it was just a question. The answer is.
And hopefully we'll get the poll results up. If not, we'll talk about them when I can finally see them. Don't have the poll results yet. That's the way it goes. Lovely technology. There's an IT services opportunity right there, isn't there? So before we go to Alita, I just want to let John Costas weigh in. John is our lead on healthcare IT services, and what I'd like him to do, if he could, is talk a little bit about where. Oh, there we go. Now we got some answers. Wow. So nobody sees it as a roadblock. That's, I guess, a huge plus. and mostly it's aspirational. So, John, if you want to talk a little bit about data interoperability in the HIT space, which I know has been an issue in the past, and how much it's going to be a trend that you keep an eye on for 2019. John?
Sure, thanks, Patrick. And you can log one vote for unavoidable roadblock to true digital transformation from me, because interoperability in the healthcare space is one of the lingering challenges, and is expected to be one of the lingering challenges in the sector for the next several years. In fact, when I was at the HIMSS conference earlier this year in Las Vegas back in March, there's just a broad diversity of new solutions and shiny new products and just unbelievable technology, but the kind of the undercurrent of, there was almost an undercurrent of frustration, if you will, throughout the, at least throughout the conversations that I had, that, that they were only slowly addressing the problem of attaining more ubiquitous data connection across health IT systems. So where interoperability in other sectors may be somewhat of a roadblock, in healthcare, because of the context, because it's a much broader context, and there's a broader diversity, it's a much more fragmented market, and there's barriers to data exchange between players in the individual spaces, between players in the healthcare provider market, between large-scale providers and their smaller-scale counterparts, between provider organizations and the health insurance sector, between the various stakeholders in the commercial healthcare space and the folks in the government and the life sciences and pharma sector. So addressing that issue addressing the interoperability issue is going to be a substantial challenge. I don't see the challenge abating anytime soon. In fact, one of the things I heard at HIMSS was that some folks actually believe that this is still an issue that is going to be lingering for the next, perhaps as long as a decade. So interoperability in healthcare is really, we are seeing some signs and some indications that there is digital transformation, digitally transformative engagements happening, but on a much smaller scale. I think in the healthcare space, and this, if we now go back to looking at IBM versus Accenture and the strategies in each that you just heard about from Boz and Jen, this really highlights a sector where the divergent strategies are having divergent results. Accenture has been one of the leaders in our healthcare IT services benchmark because it has taken more of an industry-focused approach. It has that cachet to be able to consult with key decision makers in healthcare organizations, as opposed to, and it's reflected in their performance, certainly, as opposed to IBM, which has taken, as Jen detailed a few minutes ago, a more technology-focused approach. And I think that they are shifting from that. I think they've recognized the need to be able to scale down, not just to smaller scale healthcare clients, because they're still doing a lot of business, both of companies and many others as well, still doing a lot of business with large scale health organizations. And both like Accenture and IBM have had some challenges scaling down to smaller clients in terms of the size of the organization and the extent of the IT infrastructure, but also scaling down within clients, scaling down to more bite-sized projects. So addressing the interoperability challenge is going to be an issue, and being able, I think, to co-innovate with clients on an individual issue basis, if you will, because there's another area of significant variance across healthcare systems. One healthcare system, their principal objective in the near term may be to address security. Another may be to address patient safety. Another may be to address the interoperability issues within the healthcare system itself. So you've got to be able to go in and address those problems on a case-by-case basis. And I think maybe this is kind of pointing us in a direction where you have to not only be vertically specialized and vertically focused, but you've got to be customer-centric and customer-specialized as well. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about the individual sector, and I'll turn it back over to Patrick to continue the presentation.
Thanks, John. I think you just encouraged everybody by saying that there was a problem out there that's going to take 10 years to resolve. I can't think of a better thing for a consultancy to hear, or a consultant to hear, than get a 10-year problem. So with that, we'll turn to Alita to talk to us about Capgemini and what they've been undergoing in the last year and how that's going to position them for 2019. Alita?
Thank you, Patrick. Just wanted to check if we want to show the poll results that we just collected before I go into Capgemini.
No, I'm going to make everybody wait. Let's hear about Capgemini, and then we'll get to it.
Okay, sounds good. The last vendor on the list, Capgemini. So when we look at assets and co-innovation, assets have been in use by Capgemini, especially in consulting. So they would use pre-configured content or tools and methodologies or software-based solutions that would enable the delivery of consulting services, reduce the time, improve efficiency and quality of the services. So that's really has been there for a while now, and it's part of the consulting service delivery. I think the more important part to address here around Capgemini is that co-innovation has really been picking up speed with the company, and it's something that's been on the radar. 2 years ago, the company began establishing what it now calls a Global Applied Innovation Exchange Network. It now has 16 locations in Europe and North America and Asia Pacific. And the real goal for this is to really be close to the client, to work together with them, to understand the business-specific needs and develop solutions jointly. What's important to note is that it's not only Capgemini working with the client. It's usually inviting an ecosystem of partners. Academia are also involved. Startups are really an important part of the Applied Innovation Exchange platform. So integrating external resources, integrating with Capgemini resources, and providing offerings across the portfolio is something that's really driving the activities in the Applied Innovation Exchange. And the real goal is to drive business and technology transformations for clients. And I think the last items around co-innovation and the Applied Innovation Exchange is really the applied part. So making sure that not only you develop, design a nice solution for the client, and it's very interesting and so on, but it's really how you apply it for the business. So making sure that it's implemented correctly and is driving the necessary business outcomes for the client. That's really important, and that's something that Capgemini really making sure happens. So seeing through and working together with the client from the very beginning to the end and making sure that the results are generated is really part of the Applied Innovation Exchange. From the industry side, so as opposed to Accenture, Capgemini does not go to market by vertical. So to make sure that it differentiates and is applicable to clients' industries, the company has selected specific verticals in which it has developed industry specialized solutions. So, I can call out financial services as one of the leading verticals and one of the richest verticals with specialized solutions. Public sector is another one, and I think lately manufacturing has really been an area of emphasis for Capgemini in terms of developing industry specialized solutions. Digital manufacturing, that's really one of the service, one of the segments that the company has invested in the past several quarters to develop industry expertise. So the solution is specifically digital manufacturing, is to deliver transformation in manufacturing and cover areas such as asset management, operations management, cybersecurity, complex system simulation. So adding offerings within those segments is really an area, and I've heard Capgemini provide examples about clients taking on such solutions. One thing that I wanted to call out is that SAP is also contributing to digital manufacturing. There is a solution called Fast Digital for Discrete Industries by SAP and Capgemini. So there is also partner components to the digital manufacturing solutions. And, talking about SAP, another area is to develop solutions around that support adoption of SAP S/4HANA. So in June, the Capgemini made a new release of the PaaS Industry Solutions portfolio, which combines SAP model company offerings with Capgemini industry expertise and essentially drives adoption of SAP S/4HANA. So the SAP model company offerings are prepackaged solutions. They're ready to use, and they're targeted, specialized to industries. So in this case, those would be upstream oil and gas, manufacturing, automotive, and life sciences. So I expect an increase in activities around those offerings for Capgemini in the next few quarters. And the last item, digital transformation and human transformation. We certainly see Capgemini expanding its portfolio mix in terms of adding new offerings, and cloud, cybersecurity, analytics. Those are all, and digital services are all areas where the company is investing. And I wanted to call out digital services as one of the areas that's really been very active for Capgemini, especially to expand capabilities through acquisitions. So 5 acquisitions in the area of digital services over the past several quarters. And the goal is to develop front-end business digitization, such as help clients improve e-commerce and marketing, engage directly with clients and users, so effectively address the customer experience and user experience needs for the clients. And the important part for those acquisitions is that the capabilities that the company gains around digital innovation strategy, design consulting, and digital design studios. And the last item, digital design studios, I think are really an important item because not many IT services vendors have such capabilities. Accenture is the one that comes to my mind as a leading vendor when we compare in the IT services space, but Capgemini is really picking up speed in this segment and bringing in capabilities that are offered to the client. But when you look at the change management part, and I want to say that change management, is offered to the client, but I think it's important to understand that change management internally for the vendor is also important. So being a digital vendor internally is easier to learn from your own experience of your own digital transformation and to bring that expertise to the client. So, from the acquisitions, Capgemini gained experts that are skilled in design consulting and experts that work in digital design studios. And those people, they came on board. So, for example, the Fahrenheit 212 people in New York City, they joined the office in New York City. And they became part of the Applied Innovation Exchange. And I recently talked with Capgemini, and they said, well, those people are really bringing a change internally for us in the way we work, in the way we deliver services to clients. So they're adding, their digital expertise, for example, their design thinking expertise, their ideation expertise, and how they work with clients. And they're really changing the way we work internally. This is a good thing because we see Capgemini moving and becoming more open to new ways of working internally, and this brings the implication around internal change management. So how would leadership oversee the way digital and design thinking affects how Capgemini works, and how, for example, more traditional employees that are involved in traditional outsourcing deals interact with the new type of people that join the company, that are more digitally oriented. They have different ideas and different ways of working. So change management internally for the vendor is also important, as well as offering it to the client. With this, I think we can turn it over to Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that what you mentioned there at the end about Fahrenheit 212 is it sort of sets up well in terms of looking at PwC and Accenture, both of which made similar acquisitions, PwC with BGT, as I mentioned, and then Accenture with Fjord, as companies that had an impact internally on the way that those companies do business and the way they're organized and think and go to market. For me personally, it's been helpful to look at it's been nice for me personally, because in the last year or so, I've gone from talking about Capgemini as a company that our clients should be paying attention to and everyone in the IT services space should be keeping an eye on, to fielding a lot more questions about Capgemini. So I think they've turned a corner, and I no longer look like I'm crazy because I keep saying pay attention to Capgemini, and they're not popping up on radar screens. Now they are, and so that's a good thing. So here's our poll results. Essential accelerator being the top thing on data interoperability. And there was a comment that came through in the Q&A section that talked about how it really is all three of these things. It's essential, it's a roadblock, and it's aspirational. And that kind of made me think of when the euro was being introduced in the late 1990s, how it was described as politically impossible and economically inevitable. I think maybe that's exactly where we are with with data interoperability. It's politically impossible and economically inevitable. So with that, we've got a few questions that have come in that I want to get to. We're just up about against it on time, but we'll take these real quick. The first one is, and please, if you have other questions, we do have some time, send them in. What is the most likely stumbling block in 2019 for Accenture? Boaz, it's all you.
It's a good question. Well, I mean, we've been talking about how successful they've been doing across most of these dimensions we've been talking about as strengths we've seen. So it's really hard to kind of point to one specific roadblock, but I think as an organization, I think they're becoming too big to change at that scale they are. I think going to the economic reference Patrick just made from euro, now we're thinking about too big to fail, not too big to change for Accenture, kind of making that connection there. But I think what may really stumble them along the way, certainly from a macroeconomic perspective, trade wars, talks, and any kind of potential change in the political climate, especially in the U.S., could have some impact on not just them, anyone who's in the industry kind of frees up some discretionary IT spend and whatnot. But I think what we start seeing from some of the more of like India-centric vendors and tier 2 vendors, I think, mid-tier vendors, I should say, is becoming a little bit more aggressive through open source platforms as well as self-servicing platforms, offering their clients a little bit easier access to solutions that can be more off the shelf and whatnot. We were recently at an event of a mid-tier vendor called NAIT Technology, and they have kind of a pretty strong story around how they compete in the market with specific verticals and how they're actually able to win business from some of the big guys. And what we see is that change into the more those digitally focused awards. They're smaller in size, which actually plays a little bit better into those sub-billion-dollar kind of vendors. That actually helps them to be a little more nimble with pricing and whatnot. So while they may know what's going on with the Global 2000, I think those startup-like and mid-tier vendors are what may be eroding some of their foundation actually, and where they might be seeing for the long-term sustainability.
Excellent. So a second question that's come in. You mentioned IBM and blockchain. Do you have specific research around blockchain? That's a great question. So within my practice, we look at services, professional services, IT services. That's what we're focused on. We don't delineate a lot by the specific technologies. We do have an analytics and insights practice that Jen Hamill leads. But even then, we're still looking at the services associated with analytics and insights, not the particular technology involved. And even when we look at global delivery and automation, we're not talking about automation as a technology. We're talking about automation as part of the services offerings. With that said, we do have digital transformation services as well, where I think all of the emerging technologies, cloud, RPA, blockchain, AI, IoT, everything comes in under that big umbrella because it is digital transformation services. Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about what is captured in there?
Sure. So I think, Patrick's right in that we're not looking at technologies in a vacuum. We're not looking at, the latest, technical specs of the different blockchain platforms. We definitely have capabilities in that area, but our focus in the services practice is around looking at engagements that services vendors are having with clients around the topic of digital transformation. And what we define that as is, a fundamental change to how a business runs. It's more than just bolting an analytics software suite on top of an existing database. It's really about using technology as well as transformation of people and processes to change fundamentally how a business operates. And so blockchain obviously has a lot of implications for digital transformation. There are some great use cases out there and some interesting engagements from vendors across the spectrum. I mean, IBM is one example, but we're also seeing a lot of activity from EY, PwC, and a lot of the Indian vendors too are starting to get into blockchain as well as Accenture. So it's definitely a hot topic, but I think from our perspective, when we look at how blockchain is being used, when we're looking at it through the lens of what business processes are clients looking to apply a blockchain solution that will also include other technologies, inevitably to make sure that, you're not just, plugging in blockchain to an existing IT infrastructure. There's a lot of, cloud and analytics and data integration work that has to be done as well. So it's really a much broader engagement that blockchain is a part of. But it's not a specific focus at this time. I think, in 10 years will we have a blockchain services benchmark? Maybe, but
possibly, yeah.
But right now, the technology is not nearly mature enough as a business driver for our services vendors to warrant that at this time.
I think the way you said it too, that it's not, you don't just plug blockchain into a process. It's part of a larger package of associated technologies and associated services, and it's actually after a business problem, which is why we don't look at digital transformation as just a collection of technology assets. We look at it from the view of services that are the umbrella over the top of that. And so our view of digital transformation is trying to see the way that the vendors actually apply that full range of services and technologies to a client's problems, rather than just say, let's focus in on an individual technology. That plug something in isn't really, in our mind, that useful. Another question that's come in, can you comment on the potential for cultural clash when creative firms are acquired by IT services firms? This is such a great question. Have you seen any signs of friction or success in this area? Wow, yeah, cultural clash. Boz, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I just published the Global Delivery Benchmark a couple of days ago, but certainly a topic of clash of cultures and rising attrition rates have been on our radar for the last 6 to 9 months, and especially as a lot of those IT services firms are acquiring as aggressively as they have been, some of them especially, in the design and the creative space. The way we see it from conversations with the folks on each side within those organizations, the traditional IT services firms have a more of a run the business kind of operational models that stick to the SLAs and go on just to kind of gotta run at the business really. Creative minds are set up just differently, and they are a little bit more ready to allow the client to control and dictate the terms of the engagement. Ergo, there certainly has been some clash, and I think it's more of a friction than anything else, than actually opportunities. Yeah, Accenture likes to talk, we have a culture of cultures, But if you look at the attrition rates, it's climbing up to 17-18% right now, which is above what we track currently, which is about 16% on average. So they don't seem to be concerned about it, because they just know it's an industry phenomenon. Everyone is experiencing similar, attrition rates, and they have no problem to hire. But I think the design folks, as soon as their contracts and their agreements are up after the acquisitions, I think many of them are moving right along to stick to what they know, and it's what do well creative, because those IT services organizations have different agendas, especially when a lot of those agencies are typically private firms, and IT services, majority of them are public, and they run to the Wall Street schedule rather than more of a let's do creative briefs and whatnot.
So the cultural clash is in large part based on the business model clash. You wouldn't necessarily go in thinking that, but if you're used to being a publicly traded company and having that kind of transparency, or at least that kind of motivation to please Wall Street every quarter, as opposed to a privately held company that can make decisions that are a longer view, that business model clash is going to contribute. I'm going to jump up on a soapbox for about a minute before we take the last question. The key to this is leadership. If you don't have people that can actually manage wildly diverse kinds of folks, wildly diverse meaning from different backgrounds with different experiences, with different skill sets, if you don't have those people, and if those leaders aren't so soaked in your own firm's culture that you understand what you're doing and how you're doing it and how your firm does things, if you don't have those leaders, you are going to fail. And if your company isn't investing in those middle managers, believe it or not, or those sort of rising leaders, and ensuring that those people have the skills and all that to lead those kinds of teams, then you're going to fail. The culture clash is going to be there no matter what. The key to success is, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but the key to success really is investing in leadership and investing in the people, not just the really creative folks that you hired or the super data scientists that you hired. It's investing in the leaders that are there and making sure they know what they're doing. So the last question we have time for is, when do we start talking about the Z-Tech era going post-digital? The answer to that question is real simple. When's our next webinar? I know we have another predictions webinar in December, correct?
We're going to have management consulting.
We have a management consulting discussion in December.
Then predictions will be like January.
And then January will be our full-on predictions for 2019 webinar. So when do we start talking about it? To answer that question, on our next webinar, because not only are we conveniently out of time to get into the answer to that question, but I think it's a great segue into, these are the trends that we're seeing now at the end of 2018 going into 2019, but when are we actually going to start to move beyond digital, beyond what this thing is here that we're all still trying to put our hands around, but so what's coming next? So that's what we'll tackle. And with that, thank you all very much for participating. Don't hang up yet. Sarah needs to tell you what happens next. Sarah?
Thanks, Patrick. All right, everyone, please feel free to reach out to the team with any follow-up questions. If you have a few moments, please fill out the survey on your screen and let us know what topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. A replay version of the webcast will be available after the event and will be sent out to you via email. To view a list of our upcoming webinars, please visit tbri.com. Be sure to join us on next Wednesday, November 28th for 2018, the year multi-cloud and hybrid cloud became inevitable. Thank you and have a great day.